Who are we kidding? Recruitment is one of the toughest jobs that's out there. It's super stressful. There's tons of rejection. Your mind is filled constantly with different processes and different conversations. I know for me, the best way that I found to deal with stress was just to vent to my colleagues, maybe go out drinking with them, and occasionally try to dump all of this onto my partner at home who couldn't really understand it. Now, even outside of recruitment, I go to therapy and I love it. It's a place for me to unload a lot of these feelings that come up and are generated throughout the week. I think every recruiter should have one. But when I was a recruiter, I didn't even think about this. And if I would have mentioned it to someone, I probably would have gotten laughed at. I think there's a misconception that only weak people go to therapy. But really, it takes someone pretty strong to acknowledge that they have something to work on and that they could use some help. So today, this is a story of someone who is a veteran in the industry, nearly 30 years of experience. He was the founding member of Robert Half in Tokyo and one of the few who was at Robert Walters when they were starting up as well. David is someone who has had a passion for helping people and for counseling since a young age. And he's recently rediscovered it. He's someone who's experienced the benefits of therapy firsthand, not only using it to overcome anger issues and stress and burnout, but also letting that propel him into the top biller spot for 5 years. So if you don't believe that therapy and coaching can be beneficial, then please check out this episode. And I encourage you, if you're feeling any kind of symptoms of stress, of numbness, being exhausted all the time, not having a place to think, take some time for yourself. Give yourself the gift of reaching out for help. It's the strongest thing that you can do, and it's only going to make you a stronger person for it. So you can find David at mindbridge.life or on LinkedIn, but please first check out the episode and let us know what you think. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by the man, the legend, David Price. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks, Steve. I'm
This is
glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
nice. So, a veteran in the industry, just talking about your recruitment experience, there's obviously like ups and downs in everyone's career. I'm curious for yourself, David, do you remember any time when it was maybe a low point or just a really tough obstacle that you had to overcome? And can you tell us
How
a
much
little
time
bit
do you
about
have?
this?
How much time you got, my friend? I mean, it was really, really hard when you start off. East West. I'm grateful to them for giving them my first opportunity. I got that job because I tutored their son, Jeffrey
Who?
O'Hara, who
Oh,
is the owner of Tokyo Juice. This is the second time I've given him a plug. I went there, and their style is, and I think it's still this way. I don't know, but, it's you have your own little cubicle. You can't see outside of it, except maybe people walking by. And I didn't really even know this at the time. That's just not conducive to my working style. I like it a lot better if I'm around people. And so that was tough. And it was really, really difficult. And especially, you know how it is in recruiting. Before you've made that first placement, you can't see it. You're just like, when's it gonna happen? Is it gonna be a week or is it gonna be a month? Or,
hmm.
what do I have to do? Am I doing the right things? And there's just a lot of uncertainty. And that was pretty stressful. That was the first one, yeah. So that was a pretty tough time. Yeah,
So just kind of working on your own in this little cubicle and not understanding, okay, am I actually making progress or
yeah,
not before that
yeah.
first deal came through? Hmm.
Mm. And I think
Okay.
some recruiting companies are more like that. I think it's changed a little bit. I think recruiting companies are a little bit more team based, or at least some of them are. I don't, I've never talked to you and exactly how you did it at Shahani and Associates, but I know, I went to Walters, Robert Walters. I went and helped them start up. I was there 6 months after they opened doors in 2000. And it's more of a team-based atmosphere. And one of the reasons they can do that is they do like accounting and technology, where a lot of the roles are interchangeable. A good accountant can work just about anywhere. So, you just sit on a desk with people around you and you talk about your accountants and your jobs. And it's the collaboration, I think. it just fits my personality. But I think in general, for certain functions, it's easier to make placements. Mm.
Hmm. And and then so you were in the initial stages of multiple recruitment companies, it sounds like, because also you for Robert Half, you were was it the initial
Yeah,
member or
yeah, I was the first. So 5 years after I was the Robert Walters, they just moved from Cross Tower to the office they are now, which is on Meiji Dori in between Ebisu and Shibuya. And they're pretty sure they're still there. And I was there and I got contacted by this guy, head of international for Robert Half. And I didn't even know who Robert Half was. And I thought I didn't really know anything outside of my own kind of little bubble. I didn't even know the Japanese recruiting company at the time, the market that well. And he sent me an email. I, and I was like, I'm not going to be interested in this. Be at work with people. You know, I studied the company, and one of the things I learned was that they were one of the largest global recruiting companies. They specialize. They do high margin. Most of what they do is pretty high margin. And I also learned that contracting or temporary, whatever temporary contracting resources, all of that means non-permanent specialists, but they did kind of high-end non-permanent specialists in finance and technology. They do that globally. And I also learned that how big of the market contracting is globally. It's the vast majority of the market. In the US, I think it's like 90% of the recruiting market is non-permanent jobs. And I
mm,
thought, well, that's probably going to start happening here, even though the Japanese market's different and the lifetime job mentality. A lot of people might not want to do this. Still, I think this is going to be the future here. And so, that I, I, the more I talked to him, the more I got excited. So I joined. I was their first employee in Asia for Robert Half, and I started. Went over there in 2005 by myself and started it up from scratch.
so you were in charge of hiring the rest of the teams and everything as well?
Yeah, I was in charge of hiring everybody. That was my main thing, was getting people on board. Um,
Wow.
there,
So you
there's a company called Protivity, which is ex Arthur Anderson, which is a Robert Half business. We work real closely to them. We do a lot. We get a lot of resources for their projects. And I went over and I got to sit in their office initially, and I think I scared the hell out of them. I went in there getting, oh, come on, meet me. Hey, you're gonna love it, man. You'll join. And a bunch of CPA, Japanese CPAs sitting out there. What is this? Who is this? But it was really cool. They were very hospitable towards me, and I went in there, and then we set up my own office in the same building in Otemachi. And just the first person I hired was a lady named Mari Takeda, who I'm seeing soon. Going to have a dinner with her, catch up. And then Simon Jelfs came over
hmm,
from Wall Street, and Simon was my second hire. We
wow.
just went from there and just started building it up. Mm.
That's wild. I mean, so you were the founder basically one of the founding member in Asia for Robert Half. You're Mr. Robert
Right.
Half
I
in
guess you
some
could say that's a
sense.
nice way of saying it. It's funny. There's a
So
there's a guy I work with right now, and he calls me the founding father. So
I get some founding father
anyway,
vibes for sure.
yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so I mean, you and how big is Robert Half now, roughly?
I think it's about 100. I think it's about 100.
Okay.
Yeah, 100 people. Mm.
So
I don't
you were.
manage anybody now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can get into that later, probably tap into that on another one of your questions, but I don't manage anybody now, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
really enjoying working there. Some ways
But
more
you,
than ever. Mm. You gonna
yeah.
say?
I mean, I guess I'm curious what you mean by more than ever.
Yeah, I went through a lot of, you talk about ups and downs. Another really tough time I had was during the financial crisis, and there's several things that happened there. If you look at the skill set to be the perfect recruiter, right? Just about all my stuff is on the people side. I like people. I like working with people. I want to help people, right? There's a lot of other things on the technical side. I'm not real strong on. I'm not 100% money driven. I like making money, but I like doing it through doing things that are connected to my values. Um, and so when the financial crisis hit, we had less than 3 years in the market. We were still pretty much in startup phase. We got hit really hard by it, and I had to lay a lot of people off. And at the same time, I did a good job starting the business. I did a good job growing the business, but I'm not, was having a hard time kind of starting to become a day-to-day medium-sized recruitment company CEO or managing director in terms of being on top of all the numbers. I wasn't real good at management reporting. I had a hard time getting my head around reading and interpreting financial statements, things like that. And, you know, the reason for that was because I just really didn't enjoy it. You know, I love the startup part, but I didn't like a lot of the part afterwards. So that was one thing. But the biggest thing, we got hit really hard by the financial crisis. So so that was really a challenging point because I had to go back on a desk after not recruiting for about 5 years and do the temp business, which I'd started up in 2006 just by doing a few placements, but I didn't. But they were socks, and socks placement in 2006 were really easy because everyone needed, if you could get a consultant, you could place them. So then, so it was challenging though. Doing that while I was running the office in a near depression, so it was just hugely stressful for me. It was really tough. So
Mm.
that was a tough time. And I'm not exactly sure how that plays into the question you just asked me, but that's
Yeah.
something
Well,
that, yeah.
maybe just to tie it in, you mentioned your values and that, as I'm coaching people as well, those values that we don't maybe consider. I know I didn't realize or kind of identify them at the time, but it led to a burnout for myself. I'm curious for you, your values, because you've clearly spent some time thinking about them, and now that they're satisfied, I guess things are going better. You feel maybe lighter and less stressed. So could you talk to us a little bit about what your values are?
Yeah, I will. And that's a good thing you asked me because, like, for example, I'm an emotional person, right? And I remember, and I, in the past, I would have told you, yeah, that's a weakness. That's really a weakness in business. And it's not a weakness. I mean, yeah, it's a weakness maybe if we're having a big board meeting and I just start crying and throw my head on the table. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit of a weakness if I exhibit my emotions then. But I use my emotions to guide me now in a lot of ways so I don't think being emotional is all a weakness. But like for
Mm.
example, when I was going through the stress in '08, '09, '09 and '10 especially, and I had all this work to do, I'm thinking, how am I going to go back on a desk and be an example to people in the office as a biller, and because that's, I'm running the business, started the business, I've been selling the dream, our methodology and this and that, and now I have to prove it. How am I going to do that? And then I found this book by a guy named Stephen Hayes, and it's called "Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life," and it's actually a workbook, but it's on acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, and I use this therapy now a lot with my clients that I work with for therapy and counseling and coaching. And I also use it for my corporate training. I use it as well. It's the backbone, and it involves mindfulness and values. And the idea, the mindfulness is just to kind of um, get a grip on what's going on. Acknowledge what you're feeling, and what you're thinking. Maybe accepting it, maybe not, but at least acknowledging that it's there and getting a little bit of peace and clarity through that. And then you access your values and you bring your values in to kind of fill the gap that's there and to put more meaning in your life and your work, or whichever domain of your life that you want to do it in. And so I did that, and I started meditating, And it was hard at first. My eyelids were bouncing up and down. I was so stressed out, but I just kept doing it. I wouldn't quit, which is another theme we can talk about later, persistence. And then I did my values. And at first I kind of did my values and I thought, wow, I'm not a business stud. My values aren't, competition and being driven and achievement and wealth. My values are awareness and altruism and purpose, self-worth, you know. So I think I do. And then I just thought I'm just going to keep it simple because that's what's always best for me. I'm gonna I'm gonna help 10 people a day. I'm gonna help 10 people a day. Now that might be a CFO who's stressed out because he's three people just left or on sick leave because of all the stress they're going through and he really needs help, or maybe it's a candidate or one of the consultants in the market that's worried about the recession. I'm going to call them up and I'm going to tell them I'm going to present their profile to five people a day or whatever. And I did that, and within 18 months, I became one of the top billers in the company globally, and that lasted for about 5 years. And
Man.
hey Levi, and you probably already know this, but what I actually did, like sending out profiles on clients, calling, it's all the same activity. It's the same, but the purpose, the meaning and the purpose that I had, you know, which just drove me, and
Mm.
having that simple thing, that simple number of 10 that I could look at as my final KPI or target. So yeah,
And it was
so
helping
that's
10
what so
people.
that worked then, and that worked then, and then I did that. And to talk to you about what drives me now, those values are still there, but I did that. And throughout my time uh, in recruiting, I never forgot my original thing about being a consultant. Being a counselor, being a mental health counselor, but I always just had something else going on. Went to Walters. I'm happy here. I like it here. Maybe I'll do it someday. Because I kept meeting. I met this really powerful story for me. Is I met a candidate at Robert Walters who had a gap in his profile. He was CPA, good candidate, but I asked about the gap, and he said Utsubio. And I asked somebody and found out that was depression. And that was and I
Mm.
still remember that, this guy. And I just told him, and I just sat with him for a while. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat with him, which was actually a good thing to do. And then he just sat and talked, and I just said, I really am honored that you would trust me with this, but you need to be careful who you tell this to, because especially at the time, people can be discriminated against, by admitting they had mental health issues. So all those things stuck with me, and then, even after, and then what I went through with the financial crisis, and then after I had my 5 years as a top biller, I just started thinking there's really, started thinking more and more about it. And about, I think around 2019, I just went, well, quit making excuses, man. You obviously really, you need to do this. This is your destiny. You keep thinking about it so much. So just do it. So I went to school and yeah, but I hold those values dear and close to me all the time because they are what
Mm.
drive me.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting to hear that your values led you to success as a recruiter, financially, not just internally feeling happier and feeling better about what you're doing, but also actually performing better as well, because you're kind of actualizing maybe, you could put your full energy into it. And for 5 whole years, right, is a long time. It's not something you can just like murdy force yourself to do, right? You're definitely not gonna survive that long doing that. I want to transition a little bit to the world of recruitment, and also because you've seen people around you, the candidates, I guess, as well, that were struggling with Utsubyo, and maybe recruiters that have all sorts of maybe, alcoholism or um, some kind of issues, right? But I think there's a real reluctance, especially in Japan, maybe, to be talking about this openly, or to be even acknowledging that there are issues here. Um, but could you tell us a little bit about your experience with with this, and if you are noticing that there's a shift going on.
There is a shift. I mean, because even when, like, I mean, I needed help in '08 and '09. I was going through horrible anxiety. I was going through some depression too, massive stress, and I didn't do anything. I will say, one of the things again that I, appreciate that Robert does, they had an EAP program even back then, a lot of employee assistance program, which is it's counseling and it's different links for different companies. I think for Robert Half, I can't remember at the time, it was 2 or 3 sessions. It's not enough if you've got some fairly deep issues, but they will help you and they will refer you elsewhere. And I think I should know this, but I don't. But I think some companies do offer for a longer period of time as well. There's different links of EAP programs, but there's a lot of companies that offer them. It's more prevalent now, so that's one thing
Mm-hmm.
I can say that's changed. More companies have EAP programs.
Mm,
Um, there's a lot of there's a lot. Tokyo English Lifeline has a bigger presence. More people are more aware of that. Japanese people are more aware of Yori Soy Hotline. People are more aware of IMHPJ, International Mental Health Providers Japan, which I'm on that site, which has a large percentage. I don't know how many. I think most maybe of licensed English speaking counselors, and some of them speak Japanese as well. It is more prevalent. It's more, if you go, as you know, you look on LinkedIn, you can see more and more articles on there. Shame on me for not putting more on there, but I'm making that kind of my mission from now on to do that. It's something that is discussed more, but still not enough. And I'm still not sure. I get the feeling that it's it's talked about a lot more in Gaishke than it is in Japanese companies. And I don't have any hard data on that. But that's just what I
mm,
hear from people in the market, talking to people that work at the Japanese companies. And
yeah.
so I would love to, in terms of my training, which is preventative. But by the way, one of the things that I've done as a result, my inspiration from what I've seen, what I've been through is that I am a therapist and a counselor, but I do corporate training based on acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the same therapy that I work on as a counselor. But I do corporate training based on that kind of more. I like to think, try and help people from the preventative space, help them from the preventative space, so they can, the very least, they can have added awareness, so that if they do have real heavy stress or stress related issues in the future, that they'll be aware of that there is help out there and it's okay to look for it.
Mm.
Mm.
Just speaking from what I've seen, I when I first started posting on LinkedIn and I had some inbound leads come through for coaching, I did some coaching calls, and there was two guys who out of that um, ended up crying at the
Mm.
during our session, and that was totally fine. I felt like very, again, like honored that they would share
Or
this
share that with you,
this
yeah.
clearly very heavy feeling that they're experiencing, and both of them ended up going to therapy instead of coaching, which was great, I guess, in some way. At first I was worried, like maybe I've broken them with this coaching call and it went too deep, and then now they're having to go to therapy. But both of them said thank you. They were dealing with a lot, and this was kind of the impetus, I guess, for them
Yeah,
to go and seek counseling. So I
you
think,
might have you very
yeah,
well might have made the difference, sir. I mean, that's awesome. You know,
maybe.
they have you to thank
Um,
for that, because you got them to open up and really see something, and then they realize they need to act on it.
yeah.
That's
Well,
awesome.
so I mean, I haven't seen, and both of them are doing a lot better now, actually, after having done counseling for a bit, which is awesome. Um, so it does work, but I haven't seen a lot of cases, right? And if we're looking
You
back in
haven't seen a lot of
2008,
what? I'm
2000,
sorry.
I
You
haven't seen
haven't seen a lot of what?
a lot of cases. I
Cases.
haven't seen a lot of people, right? So that benefit from this, and if most people are bottling it up, I'm curious what happens. Like yourself in 2008, 2009, you didn't receive any therapy or counseling, but you're
Hmm.
still here and you're doing fine. So at the end of the day, I'm curious what would have happened, if these people didn't end up opening up. In your experience, I guess, or someone who didn't
Yeah.
seek help, what happens?
Look, I can't give you any fast and hard, you know, answers on exactly how this always present, but I can tell you that I have therapy now. I'm a big believer in it, and I've been getting therapy since 2014, and it took me a while to find someone that I was real happy with. But I wish to hell that I would have done something 5 years sooner because it was like there was just a lot of ingrained anger and self-hatred and stuff like that, right?
Mm,
Feeling like I'd done something wrong to make this happen or that happen. And it's just kind of like, just, you know, if you don't do it, and then it just gets hard to kind of clean up, if you don't fix it sooner.
mm,
So, but I mean, I guess you could say maybe me working the book helped in some ways. It helped me certainly in terms of my workplace. I did access my values, but I would have been a lot better with coaching or therapy, you know,
mm,
therapy actually back then.
mm-hmm,
So, and it's different for different people. I just think that if you can do something about it and get some professional help, it's always going to be better if that's what you need.
yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, basically, not much maybe will change, but in terms of inside how you're maybe reacting to situations, it's going to become potentially easier, right?
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
not going to just have this anger or this, yeah,
right.
self-loathing or something that is just causing you some more pain that needs to be,
That's one thing we do
um,
in therapy is we talk about, okay, what are facts? You know, what's the real world? You know, and then what is how you deal with it? How do you deal with the real world? How do you and what do you do? What are your options there?
mhm,
And in terms of, and then sometimes I get very practical, with like, okay, so, you know, maybe you can clean your room more so that your wife doesn't yell at you. Clean your room once a week. And then that'll, sometimes it's real proud on the top side, it's real practical. There's practical steps, but it's what it's what happens and how you react to what happens. So you're exactly right what you just said. Yeah.
and who are the people that are coming to you these days, just in terms of the profile or what the struggles, I guess, that they're facing?
Just just uh just I've been contacted by people um that have stuff related to trauma, to something that happened a long time ago and they haven't done anything about it. People who are going through a lot of issues related to work. I mean, one of the things that's what I say is that I work with people with workplace, relationship, and cultural stress, and I've got
Mm,
some of all of that. Um, uh, people that are having problems with their relationships at home, but also at the same time challenges with work and their jobs. You know, and uh, yeah, yeah, work seems to be a common thread with a lot of the
mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah, yeah, understandable.
Mm,
And it's interesting. Maybe someone comes to you with a work issue, but it might be not work related. At least that's the case with me. People are coming and saying, "Oh, my billing is not going well. Look at my, like, what am I doing wrong?" And then really it ends up being something at home, right? Or some relationship with their manager or something like totally unrelated to what they expected that ends up making that
yeah,
breakthrough. So,
all of their issues relate to a sense of maybe that they're they're a failure, which
hmm,
goes way back to something that happened a long
mm-hmm,
time ago. that
Mm-hmm.
feeds into how they to their relationships, into their
Mm-hmm.
workplace, into
Yeah.
how they feel over here in a different culture. You know, it affects
Mm.
everything. It's kind of like that's what you call a what do you call it? That's called a linchpin. Um, it's a core belief.
Yeah.
That's like a top core belief, one that affects everything. Mm.
Something that, I mean, just talking about my experience, because I also have a therapist now. This is recent. Um, and I've had a coach in the past that we just finished up. But something that came out of this was maybe similar to this linchpin idea. But when I was in college, I was at a Catholic university, and I am not Catholic at all. I was in Boston, and I'm from Hawaii, so totally different cultures. I get there, and there's a priest, and it was like before the first day of school. I ended up like skipping out on some orientation thing to go to a marching band party. Anyway, he pulls me aside and he's pissed, and he tells me, "You don't belong here." He's like, "I looked at your scores and like you're lucky to be here," and um and that really stuck with me, that you don't belong here. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
that's not just like you did something bad. That's kind of like you are bad, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's the
exactly.
thing, and that can stick with people, and when it does, that can be a big problem because when you have a core belief that it's not about your actions, it's about what you are, then you get a lot of guilt and shame and stuff that
Mm-hmm.
starts coming in then, right?
And
Mm,
then I carried that, like you said, I carried that with me through recruitment, because I got told no when I went to the Osaka Career Fair. They There was a recruitment company there, and I had like a little interview with them. And then they rejected me, and they were basically like, you don't belong in recruitment. We don't think you have what it takes," kind of thing. And then that's when I knew I was hearing that voice again, unknowingly, and that kind of drove me to be like, now I have to be a recruiter out of spite. And then
right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's that's what
that kind of drove
drove
me.
me.
That drove me
Yeah.
in '09. I figured they figured I was going to be a. I know, I think a lot of people thought I wasn't going to make it, because I hadn't recruited in
Hmm.
5 years, and a big part of it was kind of a, to to other people,
Spite,
and
the
it's not a
revenge.
real
Yeah.
healthy, it's not a real healthy way to, it's not a real healthy driver. But what you said actually reminded me of another one for me as well. When I was in junior high, eighth grade, I quit a baseball team to work, and the coach said, "You're no good, Price. You're a bad egg. You're just no good." Like I'm no good because I quit the baseball team to work because I wanted to make money. And that stuff sticks with you,
Hmm.
when I was in doing therapy work and going back through all of, that one came up totally, and I totally forgotten
Hmm.
about it.
Hmm.
Mentally I totally forgot about it, but probably it was probably there somewhere inside, right?
Yeah. Well, so talking about how you move on from that, because that was my driver, was that kind of negative feeling of wanting to prove people wrong, right? And that's what kept me going for the 5 years I was recruiting, and I was performing really well. I was also like working really hard, but then at some point that wasn't enough anymore, right? And my values for learning, wanting to learn more, were not being satisfied, because the plateau for learning had kind of, you know, flattened out. So yeah, for me at least, that was not enough fuel to keep going. And I feel like if I
Right,
would have had a coach, or I would have had someone to help me identify these things, I could have
right.
potentially transitioned, and maybe I could have started billing more again. Like I could have gotten on that wave, like you did, with a new
Right.
set of motivations that matched my values. That, okay, I'm going to be learning about this new area, or I'm going to be learning about managing three teams instead of one. Or so I feel like that could have saved me in some sense,
But
having
that's funny,
someone.
Levi.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
because we're, you're a young guy, I'm an old guy, You live in Chiba, I live in Tokyo, but we have a lot in common. And you think about it, that's exactly what it was for me in a way. 5 years. 5 years, I built a lot, and then I started to taper off, and it was because that's what drove me to a big part of just to prove myself. I'm going to show these people. I know they don't think I can do it, you know? And while
Mm-hmm.
I did have my values there, it was just like, and that drove me, that helped, right? That made me feel good about it. It was just still only so much. And I didn't mention this before, but I did my own company. What I did, like in 16, I decided, okay, so I've done this, I proved this, but I just don't feel right here. So I did my own company for 2 years, and it was contracting, and you know, and I kind of tried the same thing with my values and all that, but it just didn't work that time. I kept with it for 2 years. I made money. I execu executed my plan just as I wanted to, and I felt really good about that. But I sat down one day and I thought, I just don't have the passion for this. I don't have the passion to do my own, contracting business. No, nobody starts with contracting. Everyone starts with perm and then does contracting once they build their business out. And the reason is it's hard as hell. It's hard as hell. It's a
Mm.
ton of work. You do a whole bunch of work and it might only be a month-long contract. And I
Mm.
did it, and I just didn't know, and I thought, oh man, what am I doing? So I actually went back to Robert Half then after that, and they were really cool. Yuki, the boss there, met me and said, we'd love to have you back. And in a lot of ways, I've enjoyed my time back there, even though I've been, very soon after getting there, I started working on this, what I'm doing now. But they've been really, really cool about, they let me train their people. I trained 35 people at half to as the alpha uh, version of this training. I did it at Robert Half with 35 people. They know what I'm doing. They know that they have clients. They know that I'm doing the training thing as well, and they've been really, really cool about it. But that's kind of my path. But that was a long version of saying that I totally understand though what you're talking about with that. That kind of that negative motivation, if you want to call it that,
Mm.
it can only work for so long,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, I mean, although, but looking at the industry, it seems like some people have kept that negative fuel going for longer. So kudos to them, I guess. Anyway, we're kind of coming to the end of this, so I wanted to ask, is there anything else that you'd like to share with anyone who's listening or any recruiters in Tokyo?
Yeah, I'll try and throw a couple of pearls of wisdom. On the deal, you know, you sent me a couple of talking points, what you might want to discuss, and you said two things you'd recommend. And I think the two things I recommend, really, it's kind of hard to make it two, but one is to figure out what's important to you and then follow that and keep that in mind every day. And number two, don't quit. Don't
Mm.
quit. Just hang in there. Just be persistent, Just don't quit. I mean, that's I can't say it enough because there will be days when you want to, but follow your values. Don't quit. And I'll throw a third one in. Um, find people that are doing what you want to do and do what they do.
Mm.
Listen to them, watch them, maybe more than once. It might not be just one person, but a couple of people that are doing it. Make sure that they're doing, working in the same general space that you are, so the metrics are the same.
Mm.
And that's it.
Brilliant. And I guess number four is seek help if you need it. Um, with yourself potentially. If you're struggling, then no need to fight alone. So definitely reach out. People can reach out to you on LinkedIn is the best, or on Mindbridge. Um,
People can link to
.com or
www.mindbridge.life,
.life.
mindbridge.life, or you can find me on LinkedIn, no problem.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much for coming on and for sharing.
Thanks a lot, Levi. I had a really good time. I was looking forward to this, and